The Japanese Grand Prix is over and F1 is moving on to Shanghai as the Chinese Grand Prix returns to the calendar, which means that it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoy the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top 5 teams later on, which is Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull, so stick around for that. Yes, F1 is finally racing in China for the first time since the COVID pandemic started. The race was cancelled every single year from 2020 until the end of 2023. And the return of the Chinese Grand Prix is also the return of the sprint weekend. And once again, sprint has changed. Last year, the format was on Friday, there would be a free practice session and then qualifying for the main Grand Prix. Saturday would be then dedicated to sprint, and Sunday would be the Grand Prix itself. This year, however, the format has shifted a little bit. Friday will be practice, and then instead of Grand Prix qualifying, it will be the sprint shootout. Saturday will start with the sprint race in the morning, before the Grand Prix qualifying later on in the day, and then on Sunday, it will be the Grand Prix. For me, this format is going to lead to less interesting sprint races, because the teams will likely be focused on Sunday's race and not want to take too many risks, which will affect their chances in qualifying. Shanghai, however, should make for a good sprint race because tyre wear is typically brutal there. For this year though, the surface has been redone, so it will be interesting to see if that same brutal tyre wear from the past will continue, especially with this current generation of cars. As I mentioned, the last time F1 raced in China was 2019, and a lot has changed since then. The last time F1 raced there, Lewis Hamilton was a 5-time world champion, Max Verstappen had only won 5 F1 races, and Oscar Piastri was competing in the Formula Renault Euro Cup, showing just how much things have changed. Valtteri Bottas, for example, was even in the Mercedes as well. The circuit features a mixture of medium speed corners and tight slow speed corners. A lot of the corners in Shanghai punish the tyres because the cars are turning at speed for a very long period of time. The turn 1, turn 2 section is very long and brutal on the tyres. At the back end of the circuit, before they get onto the very long straights, there's a very long right-hander where they're picking up speed all the time, and this also punishes the tyres as they get absolutely pounded by the G-force. Even so, for this race, Pirelli will be taking the medium tyres in their range, which is a step softer than what we saw in Suzuka, meaning that the C2 will be the hard tyre, the C3 will be the medium, and the C4 will be the soft compound tyres. This is the same as in 2019, and in 2019 there was a total of 36 pit stops, with the majority of drivers doing a 2-stop strategy, using 2 sets of medium tyres and 1 set of hard tyres. I expect that this race will also be a 2-stop race, but I anticipate that the teams will opt to use 2 sets of hard tyres and a set of medium tyres instead. Tyre wear with the current generation of F1 cars is a little bit higher than it was in 2019, so they'll probably opt to use the hard tyres more than the mediums. Overtaking in Shanghai can be pretty tricky with all of the corners, but it is very much possible for overtakes thanks to the tyre wear, and you can see that because in 2019 there was a total of 40 on-track overtakes. To help with overtaking, the circuit features 2 DRS zones. One DRS zone down the pit straight, and the second DRS zone is on the exit of the very long turn 12, turn 13 section as they run down the back straight. This is the main overtaking spot, but expect to also see overtakes going into turn 6. The last time F1 raced in China, the pole position lap time was set by Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes, and that was a 1:31.547. During that lap, he reached a top speed of 320 km per hour down the back straight. In the race itself, the fastest lap of the race was set by Pierre Gasly in the Red Bull, which kind of shows just how long ago it was, and that time was a 1:34.742. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, it was solid points yet again for Fernando Alonso, as he's just extended his contract with the team as well. Once again, he was able to fend off George Russell. He was also able to fend off Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri, who are in faster cars at the moment, as they all faced the Great Wall of Fernando and lost out. For his teammate Lance Stroll though, it was disappointment yet again, as he missed out on points. Going into the Chinese Grand Prix, it will be very interesting to see how Aston Martin gets on. In Suzuka, they surprised me by being one of the fastest cars in a straight line, and with China featuring a very long back straight, it will be interesting to see if they can use this possible new feature of their car to their advantage. The circuit also features a number of very slow speed corners. However, the circuit does also feature some high speed corners, which could be a slight issue for them, as they were not as strong in the S section in Suzuka. With the chaos of only one practice session to get it right, Aston Martin will be relying heavily on the experience of Alonso. For Stroll, once again, I can see him having a difficult weekend where he will struggle to score points. For Mercedes, the Japanese Grand Prix was a bit of a disaster and a letdown. They qualified very well, and it looked like they were actually decent in high-speed sections, which was impressive given everything else that has happened so far for them this year. But in the race, it all started to fall apart, as Mercedes struggled with tyre wear. Their pace dropped off faster than the other cars that they were competing with, and going into China, a circuit which has historically been brutal on tyres, then I can see them having another difficult race, especially as they only have one practice session in order to try and get tyre wear right. Lewis Hamilton has started the season very slowly, and he is only 1 point ahead of Lance Stroll, which I do find very surprising. He seems to be struggling to fully understand the car, but in Japan, at least in qualifying, it started to look like he might be slowly starting to get on top of things. For McLaren, the Japanese Grand Prix was telling that they were beaten by Ferrari, despite Ferrari using two very different strategies. The team does have some positives though, and they are just as strong as Red Bull in the high-speed sections, which is going to be very good for them in China with all the high-speed and medium-speed corners. However, there are also a number of very tight corners, and McLaren is still struggling with mechanical grip out of corners, and this is going to be an issue for them. This followed by the fact that there is a very long straight, which will work against them as they're still not the fastest cars in a straight line, it has to be said. It could be very difficult for me to see McLaren beat Ferrari this weekend, and instead I think they will be fighting with Mercedes and Aston Martin, and I do think it will be pretty close between those three teams. Oscar Piastri does need to improve his race performances. He did struggle a little bit once again in Suzuka. He is still getting there bit by bit, but he is almost starting to cost them some points, especially compared to Lando Norris, who can at least fight the Ferraris. For Ferrari, the Japanese Grand Prix was an eye-opening, positive weekend for them, as they fully confirmed that the Ferrari is pretty incredible on its tyres and very flexible with strategy. They managed to make a slam dunk two-stop into a one-stop race with Charles Leclerc, and he still had very strong pace to boot. But once again, it was teammate Carlos Sainz who came out on top, and really it was down to him qualifying much better than teammate Leclerc. Going into China, with it being a sprint weekend, it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Last year, Charles Leclerc was a lot more impressive than Sainz when it came to sprint weekends, but Sainz this year has been on another level, and I don't really know what will happen between them. Leclerc needs to get his qualifying performance sorted out, otherwise he's possibly going to lose to Carlos Sainz once again this weekend. I anticipate that Ferrari will be closer to Red Bull this weekend, and I do think they will be able to beat one of the Red Bulls this weekend. And finally, for Red Bull, Japan was pure domination. But this weekend, I don't anticipate that they will be as far ahead, and I think they might actually be vulnerable to Ferrari with at least one of their cars. Obviously, I don't mean Verstappen, as he will probably dominate, but teammate Perez could be vulnerable, especially over one lap. And if he is vulnerable, then the race could be difficult for him. The sprint weekend means Perez doesn't have the same amount of time that he usually has to get up to speed, and sometimes he does just need a little bit extra time to get up to speed. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the Chinese Grand Prix? Well, I think the top midfield team and driver will be RB once again, and it will be Yuki Tsunoda who is the top midfield driver. But what about the top 5? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Max Verstappen yet again. I know it's a boring answer, but it's just inevitable. But what about the top 5 in the race? Well, for P5, I am going to go for Lando Norris in the McLaren. P4 will be Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. P3 will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. P2 will be teammate Carlos Sainz. And once again, I think Max Verstappen will win the Chinese Grand Prix. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you guys think? In the comment section down below, let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.